Hi, I'm Christina, and this is Tomes and Tequila. Today, I'm gonna probably ramble at you for a little bit, and it's because I asked my kids what I should talk to you guys about in a video. And the response I got was, well, from my son, nothing, which is kind of funny. But my daughter's response was that I should talk to you guys about how I turned them both into nerds, which kind of made me laugh, and I thought it was funny. But it really got me thinking about actually another YouTuber who is doing Veda also this year, and whose channel I absolutely love. His name is Alejandro, I think, and he does Active Dad Lifestyle, I believe is his channel name. And if I can figure out how to do it, I'll put one of those little cards up here where you can click to go to his channel and check it out. And he's a single dad, and he's made these amazing videos, most of which include his cute little daughter, Penny. And anytime I'm watching his videos, which are done so well and so professional for someone who's just started off doing YouTube videos, it always makes me laugh and think of when my kids were little. And as I've mentioned before on here, my children now are 23 and 20. My son is 23 and my daughter is 20 years old. Apparently, I somehow turned them both into raging nerds, which is really funny, and in totally different ways. But this came about, the subject came up recently, and apparently my daughter thinks it noteworthy enough for me to make a video about, because while at college, in her spare time recently, she had 3 different translations of the Iliad, and in her spare time at college, she was reading all 3 translations and comparing the texts to see the differences in the translations. And she goes to a very hard college. And the fact that was what she decided to do for fun in her spare time is kind of hilarious. And she feels that this is all my fault. To take it back a little bit and to get kind of personal on here, I had my children very young. I married my high school sweetheart and got married right out of high school when I was 18 years old, and was pregnant with my son right after I got married. So I had him when I was 19, and right after he turned a year old, we got orders to Italy. So my husband's in the Air Force. We moved there when he was like 15 months old, I think. And I did well in school, throughout school. And from the time I was really little, I always wanted to be a doctor. I had my sights set on becoming a doctor from the time I was very little. My father worked as an EMT for a while and had a bunch of medical textbooks at the house when I was very little. And I grew up just fascinated by the stuff. Always wanted to be a doctor. When I decided to get married and stuff, I always had the intention to go back to school. But got pregnant, had a son, moved overseas, and focused on being a mom. I took a couple college classes right off the bat, but just didn't have the opportunity or really the inclination after a point to go to school. And my husband's job is very intensive and he works extremely long hours. And I decided at a certain point that my focus was going to be on becoming like a really good mom. Like that was what my calling was in life, was just to become like the best mom I could possibly be. I was very paranoid about the fact that, not paranoid is probably not the right word, insecure about the fact that I didn't have a phenomenal education, we'll say. I've always read a lot and was very interested in a lot of different things, and felt like I could become a self-taught woman, which I'd say now is a little bit easier than it was before, because now, you know, everything you could ever possibly learn is available online at your fingertips. I mean, we all have smartphones in our pockets where you can learn anything that you want to know about. You can find on YouTube pretty much anything you could ever want to learn. There's a tutorial for on YouTube. I mean, now it's a lot easier than it was, you know, a while back. But I'd kind of had it in my head that I could, you know, I could be a self-taught woman, really. And that I wanted to raise little Renaissance people. So I'm trying to keep an eye on how long this is so that I don't make this like a humongous video, because I realize I'm getting really personal in my effort to explain something that my daughter probably half-assed said in a joking manner. But I decided I was gonna raise little Renaissance kids. Like, I lived in Italy at the time. You know, was very, you know, we moved to Italy in 95. So in 95, I mean, nobody had computers. No one had a cell phone. Most of us didn't even have home phones. It was like a totally different experience than what it is for people who live over there now. But, you know, surrounded by culture. But I decided that, you know, I was gonna grow this, especially, you know, my son at the time, these little well-rounded, cultured children. So I read to him everything I could get my hands on, spent all of my time drawing with him, talking to him, playing music, all kinds of different music with him. He was obsessed with movies, so to be honest, we watched way more Disney movies than, you know, you probably should. So I don't want to make it sound like all we did was sit around and talk about Picasso or something, because anyone who knew us at that time would know that my son watched The Lion King on repeat way more than a you know, a parenting expert would tell you that you should let your kid watch The Lion King. But you know, I just tried, especially at that point when it was just him, to really talk to him a lot. I spent all my time playing with him. And then when I had my daughter, when she was little, first of all, the two of them were night and day different, which you don't realize when you've only had one kid, that the second kid's going to come out and be a totally different beast. And it was clear that both of my kids were very smart to start off with. My husband's a very smart guy. His family's full of incredibly smart people. I don't know, when my daughter was young, I had read a classical homeschooling book, and I was really fascinated by classical homeschooling, and that combined with my love of certain subjects really ramped things up when my daughter was young. And like, I love Shakespeare. So I bought my kids these like young Shakespeare books and would read them Shakespeare stories, because I had read that, you know, if you teach kids about subjects when they're young, then they won't find them irritating or boring or anything when they're older and they have to read them. So I figured, you know, if my kids loved Shakespeare when they're 5, they're gonna find it fascinating in high school when they have to read it. And it proved, at least with my kids, to be true, because my daughter is just in love with Shakespeare and was probably in high school the only student who'd read all the Shakespeare plays before she had to in high school, and was actually teaching her her teacher things about Shakespeare that her teacher didn't know. When it came to Shakespeare, had read, you know, the Harold Bloom, you know, Bibles on Shakespeare. You know, I'd have them watch plays and talk about Shakespeare, and because I was excited about it, they were excited about it. And my son's name is Troy, so the Iliad thing kind of makes more sense now. But because of his name being Troy, I would try and tell him about, you know, the Trojan horse and all this. So I bought kids' versions of those stories. And when he was in Boy Scouts, I was a Boy Scout leader for a while there, which is hilarious. But I had them do all kinds of stuff that I think made the dads kind of scratch their heads like, she's doing stuff that none of the other ones are doing. But during one of the meetings, they reenacted the Trojan horse story for all the other parents and stuff. And they did a phenomenal job at it, and it was great. It was this kids version that they did so well. I don't know, I was excited about all of these different things, and so I felt like my kids would be excited by it too. And I had all kinds of crazy rules that I made them follow, like my son's fascinated by movies and really wanted to watch the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings things, and I told him that he couldn't watch the movies unless he'd read The Hobbit first and then the Lord of the Rings books. So I showed you guys in a video what our copy of the Lord of the Rings looks like, and it's fallen apart, it's in pieces. But I did make him read the books before he could watch the movies, and he had to start with Hobbit first, because you know the Hobbit story is important to read before you read the Lord of the Rings, because it's vital that you know the background first. You know, classical music, I would play classical music in the house all the time. And back to Boy Scouts, I did a music section with them and made them all listen to all kinds of various types of music. I had a friend who was in a bluegrass band, so I'd make them listen to bluegrass, and like a huge fan of classical music. Play classical music in the car, or lay down in the living room with the lights dimmed and play classical music, and then ask the kids like what pictures they would get in their head when they heard the classical music. Or when we lived in England too for a while, and we went to Stonehenge, and Stonehenge is kind of disappointing actually, really. You could kind of get the gist of Stonehenge just by looking at a picture of it in a book or on a TV show or something, because you're literally like driving through fields and then you see the stones and there's just nothing else. I'm sure that there are a lot of other people who find it really fascinating, but for us it was like, yeah, there's some stones. Now we gotta drive back home again. But after we went and saw it, then the whole drive home, I was just making up stories with the kids about, you know, what the stones might actually be. I remember talking about like giants and footstools and tables. I realize I'm rambling, but apparently all of this various ridiculous after-schooling kind of things that I did with my kids in an effort to turn them into little Renaissance people paid off, because both kids did phenomenal in school. I'm very proud of the both of them. My son's working on his master's in history. He did great in high school. He worked and paid his way through college. Did fabulous on his bachelor's program, made great grades, and is now working on his master's and is doing phenomenal in his master's program at 23. And my daughter at 20 is going to a phenomenal college and doing very well there. Did great in high school. And even more than that, they're both great people actually. And, you know, for being someone who was so insecure about, you know, not having gone to college and feeling like trying to be a self-made woman, and, you know, on this quest to try and learn things myself and, you know, give me the culture that I felt like I was missing out on by not going to school and all that. I think that I did a pretty good job. It's like the big thing that I'm most proud of in my life. So I really, it's goofy, and I'm sure that my kids probably didn't want me to make a serious video about how I turned them into nerds, because my son would probably say that my turning them into nerds probably involved more things like the Easter Bunny bringing us every season of Sliders one year when my husband was deployed, and we sat and like binge watched every episode of Sliders while eating the Easter candy. And when he was older, our fascination with Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But so I don't want you to think that our house was just full of Beethoven and Shakespeare, but you know, there's other nerdy stuff in there too. And it's funny because I told them that they turned me into a nerd, but every time I watch this other YouTuber's video with his cute little kid it just makes me think of mine being little. And I have a niece who, every time I do a live video with my daughter and we talk about books and stuff, she says, how did you make your kids, like, how did you get your kids to be like this? To where they're, you know, willing to come on a Facebook Live and, you know, at 20 go, All Quiet on the Western Front and the Iliad and the Odyssey are like my favorite books. And, you know, my daughter was so excited about the newest translation of the Iliad that she just couldn't, like, I think I had to pre-order it for her because she just couldn't wait to get her hands on it. So, but for those of you with little kids still at home, I would say that there is some merit to showing them those classic things when they're young and getting excited about it, because I think that most kids get excited about the things that their parents get excited about. If you have a chance to take your kids to Europe, do it. Because I had a blast with my son in Paris when he was 10. We went through all the museums and like the Orsay, I took him through the Orsay, and not in the Louvre, but by the time we went to the Orsay, I think we'd had a long day already. And I just told him that he could be the tour director because those were the paintings that he was kind of familiar with. So we would just walk through the Orsay and he pretended to explain what we were seeing to me. So we just walked through and he said, like, over here you'll see the sunflowers, you know. And we had such a good time. Take your kids to see stuff that you think that they might not like because they might surprise you. Take them to museums and play crazy, weird music for them. And I think that we think they won't like stuff. And so we just don't show it to them. And they probably surprise you. If any of this rambling made sense to you or you liked it, please give me a thumbs up. And please go over and have a look at Active Dad Lifestyles channel. And hopefully I remembered the name of it because I've been watching it all since we started this SSSVEDA thing. So hopefully I didn't mess it up. And I will film another video tomorrow. So you guys have a nice day. Bye.